So we're on page 154. We're holding towards the end of Perek Beis of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah. Perek Aleph of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah, as discussed last week and last year and 2 years ago. So Perek Aleph of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah lays down the foundation. The foundation being that La'olam Hashem Devarcha Nitzav B'Shamayim. Hashem created the world with His dibur, with His words, with the Asar Mamaris, and the Asar Mamaris, it wasn't a one-time occurrence that Hashem spoke and said, "Let there be light," and let there be this week's parsha. Let there be this and let there be that. And ever since, the world is just on cruise control, on autopilot. It just keeps on existing because it was impressed into existence at a certain point in time, 5,780 years ago. But rather, the speaking of the Asar Mamaris to create the world is something which is ongoing, which is and every single moment, Hashem, the words of the Asar Mamaris are constantly invested within creation, and were these words to leave creation, so all of creation would revert into nothingness. That was the foundation we laid down in Perek Aleph, and even though the Asar Mamaris only addressed 10 major creations, but as we learned, there are many different ways of turning around the letters and selecting the letters and gematrias and chilufim and temuris and sirufim, and yes, not the can. There's infinite amount of possibilities, and that's why they're infinite creations, and all creations come from the Asar Mamaris. Not only come originally, but the Asar Mamaris are constantly what's giving everything its energy. In Perek Beis, which we started in last year, Perek Beis says, this is the big mistake of those people who deny Hashgacha Pratis, the idea that Hashem is at every moment controlling every small thing that happens, every single element and every aspect of every single circumstance. And those who deny the Isis Emotion Shebet Torah, the miracles in the Torah. And the Rebbe says that the source of this is the presumption that they compare the work of Hashem in creating heaven and earth. They compare it to Masa Enish V'tach B'Lo, to the work of the works and creations of a human being. When we say the creations of a human being in general, we're using borrowed terms. A human being can't create anything. The Ramban on the pasuk of this week's parsha, Bereshis bara Elokim, the Ramban says the word bara implies the idea of creating something from nothing, which doesn't really, there's no such thing in the human experience. In the human experience, we change forms. And by the way, the reverse is also true. We're going to talk about that more in Mitzvah Hashem probably in next Perek and Perek Gimel. Just like a human being can't create anything, there's nothing, a human being also can't uncreate something. We cannot take a yesh and make it and turn it back into ayin. We can change. You could take water and you can boil it, and then instead of being water, so it becomes vapor, it becomes gas. We could change the form of things, but just like the human being can't create yesh from ayin, the human being can't take yesh and make it into ayin either. This is all, as they say, b'chei kabayra. This is something which is only Hashem is able to do. And the Rebbe says that the reason why this is so important is because whatever we human beings do, it's not really b'derech klal. It's not a chiddush. If I take a piece of silver and I make a menorah out of it, I make a becher out of it, it's not a true chiddush, because the silver happens to be right now in the form of a lump. But there's nothing within the nature of silver that stops it from being a becher, stops it from being a menorah. Silver is just as amenable to being a becher as it is to being a lump. So I didn't do any true chiddush. So therefore all I did was change the form, and I reworked something in a way which l'chatchila it had the ability within it to be that. Hashem gave silver the ability to be that, and therefore once I did it, I can go away, I can walk away, I can walk in the street, and the becher doesn't need me anymore, the menorah doesn't need me anymore. But whenever you're trying to do a real chiddush, whenever you're trying to accomplish a real chiddush, then you need a constant force to keep that chiddush, to maintain it. And the example that the Rebbe gives is from Kriyas Yamsuf. The Kriyas Yamsuf was affected by Hashem bringing a ruach, a strong wind, ruach kadim aza, easterly wind the entire night, and that caused the water to split. And says the Alter Rebbe says, obviously, if the wind were to stop even for one moment,
revert back to
the water would collapse back to its prior state, which is that water flows downwards. What do you mean? How is that different than if I make a becher out of silver, that even after I leave the becher alone, the becher remains a becher, it doesn't return into being a lump? The answer is because water, the teva of water, is to go downwards. And water doesn't have within it the ability to be able to stand on its own. And therefore, if I want to be able to make water stand, I need a constant power to force it into standing, because it's hepach, it's opposite of the teva, of the nature of water, to stand like a wall. And the same thing is also, since Hashem is trying to make a chiddush over here, Yesh Mi'ayin is the biggest chiddush possible. It's a much bigger chiddush than Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf, you're just taking water, which Hashem already created, but only thing is it has one nature and I want to give it another nature. Here you're taking ayin, you're taking absolute nothingness, and you want that the nothing should be something. It takes a constant infusion of energy in order to be able to keep it, into Yesh. Now, if you look at the Torah, there are actually different types of Nisan. So one example the Rebbe brings down, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was in Har Sinai, and he asked Hashem for some signs to tell the Yidden that when the Yidden will ask for a ois or moifis to know that he was sent by Hashem. So one of the miracles, the signs that Hashem gave him, Hashem said, "Take your hand and put it into your bosom." And he took it out, and mitziras kashalag. It was had tzaras on it. And then Hashem tells him, put your hand back in, and here we have now a second miracle that happens, and his hand becomes healed. And it was a second miracle. It's not pshat that for 10 minutes, there was a miracle that was happening that Hashem said, right now the hands should be tzaras, and the moment that miracle ended, the hand automatically reverted. No, it was actually two miracles, and there's a raya from that. The Gemara brings down that from there we learned that the midah toiva is mamaheres love from than midas paranis. In other words, there was two miracles. One miracle was a miracle of chesed. That was the second miracle. The second miracle was a miracle which was gevura, because that was a miracle which made tzaras. The Gemara said from a diuk in the psukim, the Gemara derives that the second miracle happened quicker than the first miracle. The hand healed quicker than the hand became ill. There's the charaya that even when Hashem makes miracles, the miracles that come from Hashem's chesed, they operate quicker than the miracles that come from Hashem's gevura. So we see there are two separate miracles. So here we have Hashem made a miracle, but once Moshe's hand had tzaras on it, there's nothing unnatural. Think about that. There's nothing unnatural about that. A hand can have tzaras, a hand can have a rash, a hand can have tzaras. The miracle wasn't that the hand had tzaras. What was the miracle? That a hand that in 1 second doesn't have tzaras, boom, suddenly becomes covered with tzaras. That's the miracle. Because usually illnesses are a process. But once the hand has tzaras, is there a miracle that has to happen at every moment to sustain it? No, because there is no chiddush over here. So now the hand has tzaras. Now you want to undo that. You want to now get the hand. You want to heal the hand. You're going to need a second miracle right now to undo it, because there was no true chiddush. A hand having tzaras is not a true chiddush. Water standing like a wall is a chiddush. Water doesn't have the ability to stand like a wall. A hand has the ability to have tzaras. Therefore, for the water, it required a constant. A similar one is the makas dam. Elsewhere, the Rebbe talks about this also. Makas dam. So what kind of miracle? Did the water really become blood? Or was it that the water took on miraculously the form of blood? The nafkamina would be when the miracle ended 7 days later. Did we need another miracle now to turn the blood back into water?
Yes.
Or as soon as the makkah went away, automatically the water turned into water. The difference is, if the water really turned into blood, then you would need another miracle not to turn it back into water. But if the water didn't turn into blood, the Eibishter just miraculously changed the features that for 7 days it appeared and tasted and felt like blood. The moment that miracle ends, the water automatically turns back into water. Now, we don't find anywhere that there was a miracle of the blood turning back into water. We don't find that. It doesn't say it anywhere. Hashem doesn't tell Moshe, lift up your hand and turn the blood back into water. We also don't find anywhere, that the Mitzrim had to spend weeks and months draining all the blood out of the Nilus and letting water flow back in. Mashma says that as soon as the week ended, it became back water. So therefore, what do we see from this? And there's also the Mefarshim, there's the Mashmos of the Mefarshim on this, is the water really it wasn't blood. And that's why the Medrash tells us that if you had a Yid and a Mitzri both drinking from the same cup, the Yid drank water and the Mitzri drank blood. What does that mean? A miracle happened that the water that the Yid drank suddenly turned into water? No. It really was water. The miracle was that in the Mitzrim's perception and the way it looked and felt and smelled and the texture and the taste and everything, it was blood, but it really wasn't. It was really water. A miracle of that sort requires a constant, because it's not the nature of water to be blood. And therefore, as soon as the miracle went away after 7 days, so the blood automatically reverted into water. But we see that when there's a miracle that requires a chiddush, like Kriyas Yamsuf, when there's a miracle that requires a chiddush, you need a constant force. Sorry?
It's not a chiddush that water turns into blood, or had the perception. It's also shinu tefer. You need constant.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
To undo it, you need an opposite.
No. Just like to undo Kriyas Yamsuf, if the wind goes away, you don't need an opposite force. The Eibusher didn't have to bring another wind the opposite way.
You're saying it's one miracle. Kriyas Yamsuf.
There was one miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf. There's one miracle of Makas Dam that lasted for 7 days, which is that the water took on all the properties of blood, and as soon as that miracle expired, then automatically there was water again. And the Brias Ha'olam is a chiddush. Brias Yesh Mi'ayin is the bigger chiddush than anything. Therefore, obviously, it needs to have a constant koyach.
And you need another miracle to undo it.
No. You wouldn't need a miracle. If the Eibusher didn't want the world to exist, it wouldn't take another miracle. The Eibusher would just stop creating it. The Eibusher would start constant infusion of energy, and the world automatically would revert to nothingness. That's the whole point. Now, as we've mentioned in the past, when they prepared what's called the Shirim B'Sefer Tanya, when they prepared, right now it's printed in the set of Shirim B'Sefer Tanya, when they prepared the Tanya Shirim for the radio, so everything was written up, and they would give it into the Rebbe to look over. And the Rebbe would add comments sometimes, and sometimes they had questions, so they asked the Rebbe questions. So one of the questions they asked the Rebbe on this Perek was, you're bringing a Raya from Kriyas Yamsuf. But if you look at the beginning of the Perek, the Alter Rebbe says, V'hine mekan tshuvas haminim. Here we're going to respond to the minim, and we're going to reveal the toast, the minim al apikursim. We're going to reveal the mistake of hakoifrim b'ashgacha pratis or b'esis amayv siyatayra. That those who deny the miracle. So how are you bringing a raya from Kriyas Yamsuf to answer the apikursim when the apikursim don't believe Kriyas Yamsuf ever happened?
To begin with.
Yeah. The whole raya of Kriyas Yamsuf is because there are those people who deny Ashgacha Pratis, they deny the miracles of the Torah. Alter Rebbe is providing an answer to them, but they don't believe in Kriyas Yamsuf. So the Rebbe says, but that's not, that's a derech agav over here. Alter Rebbe is trying to bring out a certain phenomenon over here. The idea that if you have a certain force, that force needs to be constant in order to make a chiddush. In fact, if you look in the words of the Alter Rebbe, he says, on page 154, 5 lines on the top, V'ilu hifsik Hashem es haruach kerega, had Hashem stopped the wind for a second, hayamayim chayzrim v'nigarim, the water would continue flowing. What do you mean, had Hashem stopped? Alter Rebbe could have said, when Hashem stopped. It actually happened, Kriyas Yamsuf. What do you mean, had Hashem stopped the wind, the water would have continued? Alter Rebbe could have said, when Hashem stopped the wind, the water kept on flowing. But the whole thing here is a hypothetical. In other words, you don't really need to believe in Kriyas Yamsuf to get this. This is just you're bringing over here an example to bring out a certain point. And if you're a believer, then you have a even bigger chiddush, because you have to understand that the miracle of creating something from nothing is even greater than the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf. But then the Rebbe says something interesting. And this is another response to the question that you asked last week, but a direct response. The Rebbe says the fact that the Alter Rebbe brings a raya from Kriyas Yamsuf addresses a question that a believer has. And that is, Alter Rebbe says, the koifer, what is the problem of the apikoides? Problem of apikoides is that they think that the handiwork of Hashem and the handiwork of a human being, they operate in the same way. And therefore, just like once a human being creates something, it no longer requires the constant effort of the human being. The same thing is by Hashem. Once He creates something, it no longer requires it. That's Apikoidus. Apikoidus thinks that Hashem's handiwork and the human being's handiwork is the same thing. But then comes along a Maimin, a real believer, and says, what do you mean? Hashem's handiwork is so different than the human being's handiwork that you can't even make any rules for Hashem. All the rules that you're giving me, this is the question that you asked last week, all the rules that you're giving me, and you're saying that if you want to make something which is an emes chiddush, then it requires a constant infusion of energy. Who said? Hashem operates according to His own principles. And maybe Hashem can make that it should be an emes chiddush, and it should not require a constant force. That's the Raya of Kriyas Yamsuf. The there you could have said the same thing. Hashem wanted to do a miracle, and Hashem could have just made the miracle in a way that the water stands, and that's it. Once it's standing, it's standing. But Hashem didn't do it that way. Instead, Hashem kept a constant force, pushing the water to make sure that it stays split. What do we see from the Yamsuf? What do we see from the Nasser Kriyas Yamsuf? That this is the derech of Hashem also. That when Hashem wants to make a chiddush, the way He does it is also through a constant force. And therefore, we understand the same thing. We draw a parallel to the creation of the world, which is an even bigger chiddush than Kriyas Yamsuf. The Madach, when Hashem wanted to make a small chiddush, like Kriyas Yamsuf, He kept the wind blowing it constantly. How much more so when Hashem is creating the world, that there was a constant infusion of divine energy into creation in order to make that it should continue to exist. So this is finishing off what we learned last week, and now we are going to continue inside. And we're going to move back a little, a few lines. Well, actually, we'll start in the middle of an idea. We'll start. The first one line is Yeser, a little more than halfway from the top of the page. A little above the half point of the page. Shebi Histalkos. We'll start from the word Shebi Histalkos. Shebi Histalkos koyach habeidim and hanivra chas v'shalom. If the koyach, the energy of the Creator, were to be nostalgic, were to leave, were to depart from the creation chas v'shalom, yashuv hanivra la'ayin ve'efes mamish. The creation would revert to absolute nothingness. Ella, rather, tzarech li is koyach hapoyel b'nifal tamid. There always has to be the power, the force, the agency of the actor, the creator, within that which is being created, to give it life, and to give it existence. What is this energy? In this entire page we're talking about is this energy. What is this energy that's required? These are the energy. What is the energy which is within every single creation? They are contained in the letters of the utterances of the Asara Mamaris, the 10 Mamaris, Shebahem Nivru, with which the world was created. And this is what it says, V'ata mechayis kulam. And the Mekubal and the Shalar, Rishis Chachma, they say, Al tikri mechaya ela mahava. And even though it says, V'ata mechayis kulam, but instead of reading it, V'ata mechayis kulam, read, V'ata mahava es kulam. Dahainu meaning yesh mi'ayin. Mechayis kulam, the idea of giving life to something implies that something already exists, but you're just giving it life. So if you read just V'yata mechayis kulam, you would say that once Hashem created the world exists. Doesn't need Hashem to constantly give the world existence. But V'ata mechayis kulam, Hashem is the one. The fact that a plant lives, the fact that an animal lives, the fact that a human being, Lahavd Yid, lives, all these, that's what the Eibishter does. Come along the Mekabalim and say, no. Al tikrei mechaya el mahava. It's not only that Hashem has to be giving life to it, but va'ata mahava es kulam, you give existence to everything. You create everything. And it doesn't say you created. Va'ata mahava is in present tense. Hashem is constantly recreating the world. What does that mean? That at every moment, Hashem is re-uttering the 10 utterances and thereby giving the world existence. And what is va'ata? The word va'ata mechaya is kulam. So obviously va'ata is you is Hashem. But there's also a Kabbalistic significance to the word va'ata. Va'ata hin bechinis ha'esis ma'alef va'taf. The word ata is made up of the first letter is Aleph and then Taf. So Ata means what gives this world, what is creating the world? The letters Aleph through Taf. Vahei, and the Hey of the word Viata, Yehei Meitzoyis Hapeh, are the 5 different types of pronunciations which are possible, which are Makar Ha'isius, which are the source of all letters. Okay, let's continue. What are we talking here about? Hashem talking. Hashem doesn't have a body. Hashem speaks.
What is the point of?
What is Asar Mamaris?
What does Mamaris have to do with energy or divine energy?
But what does it mean B'chlal that Hashem speaks? He doesn't have a mouth. He doesn't speak.
That's true.
So B'chlal, what does it mean when it says Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer? What does that mean? Hashem speaks. Where's the sound coming from?
Communicates.
What does it mean to communicate? Hari Mikra Mali Dibra Kasuf. Nevertheless, we have in the Torah many places Vayidaber Hashem, Vayomer Hashem. What does it mean that Hashem speaks? So this is a basic rule which we've discussed in the past, a long time ago.
He speaks B'Lashon B'nei Adam.
In English, this
in order to understand what's going on in the Chumash. We can't.
Okay,
that's the common.
Absolutely, you're correct. Dibra Torah B'Lashon B'nei Adam.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Well,
sorry?
He imparts his will.
What's that? But there's a concept called anthropomorphisms.
What does that mean?
Anthropomorphism means when you ascribe human qualities or human characteristics to a non-human entity, but that'll call a reference to Hashem. So whenever we have with Hashem, whenever we ascribe something physical to Hashem, we have to immediately strip away anything physical from there and realize that there's nothing physical in Ma'ila at all. And instead we have to go look at the core of what that thing is, the spiritual core of what that is, and apply that spiritual core to Hashem. So for example, when we say in a pasuk, Einei Hashem el Yireav.
The eyes of Hashem is to his ones who fear him.
So what, Hashem has eyes? Chas v'shalom.
Yep.
So what does that mean? What does it mean that Einei Hashem el Yireav? So the eye, although it's physical, and we perceive things in a physical way, but what is the essence of seeing? What is the spiritual essence of seeing? Is awareness. When you see something, you become aware of it. And the best way to become aware of something is through seeing it. Yeah, you can also become aware that we have other senses also, but there's a certain, when you see something, Eini doima shmiya l'riyah. So when it says Einei Hashem l'Yireav, that means Hashem's awareness, His hashgacha, is constantly upon Yirei of those who fear Him. I'm not getting into the whole topic of Hashgacha Pratis and who Hashem is aware of everything. Well, we don't have to go into that point right now. Just to understand that whenever the Torah ascribes something physical to Hashem, we have to immediately strip away any of the physical trappings that there are and go straight to the spiritual idea behind that and apply that to Hashem. What is the spiritual idea behind speech? So you said communication, and that's correct. And what is the idea behind communication? Is revelation. Dibur is his galus, his gilui. The same words that we speak, before we speak, hopefully we think those words. We have machshava. But something which is machshava is behalim, is hidden. And when we speak, that's when we're megala, we reveal to someone else, lazulas, something which was previously hidden to us. So whenever it says Vayomer Hashem, Vayidaber Hashem, so what that means is that there was a hisgalos, a revelation of Hashem to a certain particular person. So there's a whole machlokes whether the Yidden even Marcina, whether they even heard a voice. In other words, we talk about was there a physical voice? There are many days that say no. They had a spiritual revelation, and that spiritual revelation was the same. And a similar note when it says when Mashiach comes, that it says when Mashiach comes, V'ro kol basar yachdav kipi Hashem diber. We'll see. V'ro kol basar, everyone will see Hashem. Ki ayin be'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem tzir. Our physical eyes will see Hashem. Think about that for a second.
It's impossible.
Why is it impossible?
Because the eyes are it's finite. You only can see something finer. You can't see something
Hashem has
that's
no
infinite.
form, so what do you
Hashem
do?
has no form.
No form.
And our physical eyes only see things, by the way, only see things that are physical. Our physical eyes are physical, and they only see things that are physical. We can't, forget about Hashem, we can't see kindness. We can't see radio waves. We can't see ideas. Anything that's not physical, the eye can't see. So the reason why our eyes can't see Hashem is not because He's hiding, it's because our eyes are as capable of seeing Hashem as our nose are of seeing Hashem. In other words, they're both equally capable of seeing Hashem. So it's not that there's a hell and Vehester over here. So what does it mean when Mashiach comes that we'll see the Eibishter? So again, you have to go a little deeper. What is the idea? What is the concept behind it of seeing? Seeing is experiencing. Seeing is believing. When you see something, there is a hisamtus. What?
Clarity?
A clarity and an emes to it and a finality to it. You know, I could sit and tell you something, or I can explain to you something. You get it this way, that way, and when you see something, you have the entirety of it. The thing is revealed to you. Without going into the whole chassidus behind what's different between Re'iyah and Shmiya, and whatever that quality is, we will have that Re'iyah in a lakus when Mashiach comes. So again, we have to divest ourselves and disabuse ourselves of these physical
Constraints.
And constructs that we use to understand things and realize we're talking about something spiritual. So whenever it talks about Vayidaber, Vayomer, it means revelation. Let's do this inside. Whenever it says Vayidaber Hashem or Vayomer Hashem, this is the revelation of the 22 letters, the holy letters of the Aleph Beis L'Neviim. And here's very important words. Umislapshes b'sichlam v'hasagasam b'mara hanavua. The words of Hashem, the message of Hashem, which is conveyed through the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis, it enters the mind and the understanding of the Navi. It's not that there's the revelation that the Navi is over here, I'm talking conceptually, and something is revealed to him, and the mind somehow processes it. It actually is mislabish, it enters the mind, it becomes part of the mind. Moreover, v'gam b'machshavtam v'diburam, it enters their thoughts, this revelation, and it actually enters the words that they speak. K'meshekasuv, as the Navi said, Ruach Hashem diber bi, the Spirit of Hashem spoke within me, umilase, His words al lishoini, on my tongue. When the Navi is speaking, it's the words of Hashem is being nisgala in his mind, in his thoughts, and in his words. It's entering his mind, entering his thoughts, entering his words. And that's why we know every Navi spoke a little differently. The styles of the Nevi'im differ, because every Navi had a different way of, different type of seichel. And since Hashem's words entered his seichel and his mouth, so everyone, Hashem's words came out in a unique style through every single Navi.
So his words was not his word, it was God's word, you say.
In other words,
when he was talking, when the Navi was
if
speaking,
you tell me an interesting idea,
he was not saying it, it was God who was saying it.
if you tell me an interesting idea, and I hear it,
Yeah.
and then I repeat it, can I say it's your words on my tongue? No. Your words, I got it and processed it in my way. It didn't, and then I conveyed it in my way. Over here, the slapshus is complete. The revelation and the slapshus in the mind of the Navi, and then afterwards in the words of the Navi, it's Hashem, so to say, speaking through the Navi, but not bypassing the Navi. Not bypassing the Navi. In other words, it's not as if like the Navi is a dummy with a ventriloquist. Right. It's not as if Hashem needs
Dubbing into his...
Right.
He's hoping he's... And it's being dubbed.
Right. It's not as if Hashem hypnotizes the Navi and puts him in a trance, and Hashem channels his voice like a dibuk. No.
Yeah.
It actually, the Dvar Hashem, the revelation, enters the mind, enters the machshava, and enters the dibur. And when the dibur is coming, it's Hashem's words coming through him. It's the deepest type of unity possible. That it's completely revealed and enters the seichel and the dibur and the machshava and the midas, everything of the Navi.
It's inspiration then. The Navi is inspired and he's giving over what he's inspired by.
It's more than that.
Inspiration is, okay, you're there I'm here, I'm inspired by you, I'm going to give over my words as they were inspired by you, which is different than the words actually entering and totally taking me over. In other words, I don't mean taking me over in a hostile invasion, but totally entering me and becoming part of me, and part of who I am, part of me and part of my words, and then my words themselves are conveying what Hashem said. It's totally revealed within me, Hashem. It's totally revealed within every part of me. So that's what the idea of dibur is. That's what the idea of speech is. Similar to this, that's how the letters of the Asar Mamaris are invested in every single creation. Kidiksiv, as the pasuk says, "Bedvar Hashem shamayim nasu," with the words of Hashem the heavens were made. Uberuach piv kol tzavam, and with the breath of His mouth, everything that's in this, everything in the heavens. Rak, however, there's a difference. There's a difference between the Asara Mamaris and the way it is by Nevi'im. Rak, shehi aidei shtal shlu serabis vatzumais. That the words of Hashem, as they enter every single creation, is through a tremendous and very powerful ishtalshalus. Ishtalshalus means that the energy and the light comes down through the worlds, and every single world becomes lessened and darkened a little. Ad sheyeridis lasiya gufnis, till they're able to come down into this physical world. Mashenken asagas hanavim, as opposed to that which the Nevi'im were able to grasp Hashem words, hi ba'atzilus hamislabeshes ba'olam habriya. That is the revelation of Atzilus as it comes down only into the world of Bria. So without going into the details of what the meaning of these worlds are, the Navi is a very holy person. So the Navi, even though he's a person over here in this physical world, the Navi really is an occupant of higher worlds. As we know, as we've discussed many times when we talk about the different spiritual worlds, they're not spaces, they're not places. These are madrigas, these are levels. You can have a person over here standing in this world, but he's in another world. And the Chassidus Alter Rebbe brings down the mashal many times that Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in front of Pareh. Pareh is is Gimel Klippes Atmeis, and Moshe is in Atzilus, and they're standing right next to each other. Because Atzilus is a level, Moshe was on the level of Atzilus. So the Navis, and as we know, the Rambam is Meirech, talks about at length how to become a Navi. You have to become a very holy person. There were people in the times of the Nevi'im, there were many people who they worked upon themselves till they became very holy, in the hopes that they would be zeicha to Nevuah. So therefore a Navi is able to grasp, and the words of Hashem are able to enter the Navi as these words are on a very, very high level, before they are compressed and contracted and come down through the entire chain of worlds. So the Navi is a Keli, the Navi is able to process, and because he's in a very holy place, or she's in a very holy place, they're able that the Devar Hashem, the words of Hashem, as it is in Malchus Datzilus, is able to enter their minds. They're able to process it. But a rock over here in this world can't process. There can't be the Gili of the Dibur of Hashem as there is the Gili to the Navi. So for that, the words of Hashem has to come down much further. Excuse me, but the difference between the Navi and the rock is in terms of the darga, the level of the oir, the level of the light, the level of the energy. The Navi is able to receive a much higher level of energy. The rock is only able to receive a much lower, contracted, diluted level of energy. But if you want to talk about in terms of the fact that Hashem's dibur is being revealed within something, there's no difference. The dibur of Hashem is totally entering the rock, just as the dibur of Hashem enters the mind of the Navi, the mind and the words of the Navi. The difference is again in the level of that dibur. The Navi is being able to process a level of dibur which is much higher.
But the Nevi'im are different. Moshe Rabbeinu was
Sure, yeah, obviously.
So how do you think?
He's talking in general.
So where's Moshe Rabbeinu fits in this picture?
He's talking in general. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu obviously was able to receive a higher level of Nevuah than any other Navi. But in general, we're talking about the Nevi'im are in the higher worlds, not Atzilus and Bria. And this is a very important point, this last point of this Perek, to the larger thesis which the Alter Rebbe wants to build over here, which is going to lead us into the next Perek. Which is the way that people normally think of it. When we learn Parshas Bereshis, which is this week's Parsha, so we read Yehi Oir. So what do we hear? What do we conjure in our minds? Before we learn Tanya, what do we think? You imagine this booming voice, Yehi Oir, and boom, there's light. And then Hashem commands that there should be animals, there should be fish, there should be the sun, and the moment He commands, boom. And obviously that's somewhat of a childish understanding of it, but besides the fact that it's childish, if that's the paradigm that you're looking at, so then there is the command of Hashem, and then there is what the command of Hashem creates. But there isn't really the revelation of the words of the command, or of the command itself within the creation. It's like cause and effect. But the words and the creation remain very distinct from each other. And Alter Rebbe, that's not what Alter Rebbe is trying to say. The point here of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah, it's not only that Alter Rebbe is trying to say that at every moment Hashem has to command every creation into existence. There's something deeper over here, which the Alter Rebbe is explaining over here. Hashem's words are in heaven, just like the words of Hashem enter the Navi, and they become part of the Navi. They become one with the Navi. Hashem's words, Dasar Mamaris, they enter every single creation. And Dasar Mamaris again, as through the Gematrias and the Chilufim and the Tzirufim and the Tmuras, every single creation, and is intimately nislabish. Hashem's Dasar Mamaris is nislabish within the creation. And that's very important. Because where are we going with all this? In next Perek, we're going to this place of Einoid Milvade. There's nothing other than Hashem. If Hashem commands the light to exist, and the light exists, but the command remains outside of the light. When I say outside, obviously I'm talking conceptually. I'm not talking about in terms of space. But if there's the command, and the command forces there to be light, even if this command has to continue forever in order for the light to continue to exist, but the light exists. If, however, we say no, it's not that Hashem commands the light, but the command, the Yehi Oir, it enters the light, and at every moment it is the neshama of the light. It actually enters it just like Hashem's words enter the mind of the Navi. Then is there really light? Or is there really only the Dvar Hashem?
It's Dvar Hashem. It's unity, you just said.
All there is something, it becomes the essence of the light. It becomes the neshama of the light. It becomes and that's a very big difference. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is telling us over here by comparing it to the Navi. When we're talking about, you're saying, Asar Mamaris, Hashem speaks. You want to know what speaking means? Vayidaber Hashem, Vayomer Hashem, the way it is by a Navi. Let's look at it the way it is by a Navi. By a Navi, it's not that Hashem, as we said earlier, it's not that the Navi is the dummy, and Hashem is merely talking through him. No, it actually, it integrates and becomes one with it. The same thing is, the Asar Mamaris integrate and become one with the creation. They become the creation. They are the creation. And therefore that will lead us into the next Perek, and the idea ultimately of Eined Movadei, as we'll be talking about Amir Hashem in the coming Perek. We finish now Perek Beis. In Perek Aleph, the Alter Rebbe told us the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah meaning, the word Kabbalah is Malashon, and the Kabbalah, what we received. The Medrash says, the Baal Shem Tov says, La'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim. The Medrash tells us that Asar Mamaris are constantly creating the world. And then we have the Arizal tells us that even a stone has to have a life force, which reinforces this idea. But the Alter Rebbe is not there trying to prove anything logically. The Alter Rebbe is basically stating what it says in the books. What it says about the Shtilim, what the Baal Shem Tov said, what the Arizal said. He's explaining a little the process of how it works. The Asara Mamaris, the Chilufim Tmuris, and all those things. But he's not, there's no logic going on over there. It's basically, the Alter Rebbe is saying, this is what it is. Why? How do we know? How do we know that? Because that's what it says in this Sfarim. That's Perek Aleph. Perek Beis, the Alter Rebbe switches gears. The Alter Rebbe says, he starts off, Mikan Shuvas Aminim. Now I'm going to answer all those, the Apikursim, the people who deny, and I'm going to give you a logical explanation. And that's where the whole Raya of Kriyas Yamsuf comes in. And the Alter Rebbe is logically proving over here, the Alter Rebbe is saying, you're making a big mistake logically when you're comparing the handiwork of Hashem to the handiwork of the human being, because the handiwork of a human being is yesh mi yesh, is only changing a form of one created thing to another created thing. You're not even changing a teva. You're just changing a form. If you want to make a real change in something, for example, changing a teva, like Kriyas Yamsuf, and for sure if you want to create yesh mi'ayin, it requires a constant infusion of energy. So this already is a logical idea that we can all process, we can all get, and we can bring, and we did this last year, we brought Mishalim examples and dugmais, that when you want to accomplish something which is a real new thing, it requires a constant infusion of energy. You know, we spoke about remember we spoke about that if you a bunch of kids and you want to train them to act in a certain way. Okay, you train them, and after a little while of training, mission accomplished. You could probably go away and they can do the play all by themselves. But what if it's not kids, but what if it's little wooden menchies and you're a puppeteer? Can you say you'll train the wooden things, and after a while they'll already know how to do the play by themselves? Because that's an emes chiddush, and an emes chiddush requires a constant infusion. Creating of yesh mi'ayin is an emes chiddush. So the question that can be asked is, why do we need Perek Beis? Why isn't Perek Aleph enough? And Perek Aleph, the Alter Rebbe told us, this is what it says in the Medrash, this is what the Baal Shem Tov says, and this is what the Arizal says, and this is it. That's the case. And let's move on to Perek Gimel. Why is it necessary to logically establish this idea?
You have to know how to answer the minim dapikursim.
So Perek Beis is to be able to answer the minim dapikursim.
Yeah,
so if there weren't any,
weaken your emunah.
So theoretically,
logically.
Okay, so theoretically, if you didn't know any minim or apikursim, and theoretically, if you were to know for a fact that you would never meet a minim or apikuris, you could skip from Perek Aleph to Perek Gimel. In other words, Perek Beis is not essentially needed. It's only here because Nebuch, we live in a world with apikurim. You have to be able to answer them. Okay. Listen, Damash Atashav Lapikuris, they state in the Mishnah. So the Rebbe speaks about this, and the Rebbe explains the point of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah. Where are we going, as we mentioned before? Where are we heading with all this? Shaar Hayichud. We're trying to explain here the Achdus of Hashem and the Emunah in the Achdus of Hashem. This whole 12 Parakim of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah is out here to establish the idea of Enid Movadeh. In order to understand this idea of Enid Movadeh, so we have to have everything we're talking about here, because if Hashem created the world but the world exists on its own, then Yashid Movadeh, then there's a world. How are we to understand the idea of Enid Movadeh? As we'll continue Mirz Hashem next week in Perek Gimel. Once we understand the world doesn't really exist on its own, it doesn't. It's being forced into existence at every moment by the Dvar Hashem, by the Sar Mamaris. So it's Taka Enid Movadeh. The world doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. And again, we're going to talk about this at length next week. Does the world exist? No. It's like asking, do the puppets dance? No, they don't dance. Someone is moving them. The world doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is Hashem. And there are the Sar Mamaris that come up from Hashem at every moment. They're giving an unnatural existence, but nothing essentially exist? Does this table essentially exist? No. If the mimer or the tziruf nasar mamaras were to leave it for one moment, it would be poof. So it doesn't essentially exist. So we're trying to reach a place of ein oid mavade, understanding that there's nothing but the Eibishter. If we're to learn Perek Aleph of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah and learn that the Baal Shem Tov says this, and the Rizal says this, and therefore we're mekabel it, we accept it. We accept that at every moment the world is being created anew by Hashem. At every moment the world is... Does it make sense to us logically? No, not necessarily. We would skip Perek Beis. But we're Yidden, we're Ma'aminim b'nei Ma'aminim, so we accept it. That would be counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish over here. Because that would be Yeshed Movade. What is the Yeshed Movade? My mind.
Oh, I see.
I'm bypassing my mind. And even though I look at something, I look at a bottle, I look at a piece of wood, okay, and my mind tells me that something exists, but I know that my mind is flawed, and and I know that there's Torah, and Torah is min hashamayim, the Rizal and the Baal Shem Tov, and therefore I'm going to suppress whatever my mind tells me, and I'm going to live higher than that. So there's a place where Achdas Hashem has not penetrated. And where is that? My mind. Because when my mind says, every single time, I think I told you this story in the past. It's a story. It's a joke. This is a joke about a guy who's sitting a whole night in his room and he's been mispoining and thinking about Ein Movade. And after an entire night of contemplating the issue of the idea of Ein Movade, he's absolutely convinced there's nothing but Hashem. He's in the highest holy estate, and he opens the door and he walks out and he walks straight into the wall, bumps his nose into the wall, because he's in such a... He stops for a second and says, there's nothing except for Hashem and the wall, obviously. I see there's a wall.
Yeah. You can't negate that.
Now if you were to stop for a second, there's no wall. Why? I have a munah, even though that my nose right now is black and blue, but there is no wall also not. So one way of living life is by walking around and denying your brain, rejecting what your mind tells you, and saying, I learned in Tanya otherwise. The problem with that is that you're trying to, what are we trying to say? I accept that Ein Movade, even though my mind says otherwise. But when you accept Ein Movade, but your mind isn't on board, then you yourself are not experiencing Ein Movade, because there's part of you that's out of sync with this idea that you're accepting. So if there wouldn't be Perek Beis Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah, the problem isn't that you wouldn't be able to answer the heretic. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's a heretic inside of you and inside of me. And we have to be able to get that heretic to believe also. Because the easy frum thing to do is say, I ignore that heretic. I don't have to answer that heretic, I ignore it. The problem with ignoring the inner heretic is that that's not Ein Movade. Then within you there's resistance. Even if you overcome the resistance, and even if you quiet that voice every time it arises, that's a state of Ein Movade. And that's why we have to have Perek Beis, and Perek Beis is so important. It has to make sense to us. I look around and I see this and that. Yeah, okay, you know what? When the Yidden were crossing the Yam Suf and they looked at the water, and the water looked like a wall, it looked like a wall also. You could say, wow, take a look at that. I never saw that. Can you imagine? There's water that stands. But no. Only an idiot thought that. Anyone with a little seichel realizes even though it looks like it's standing, it's not standing. There's a wind that's blowing it. And when you think about Perek Beis of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah for long enough, you look at a table and you say, even though that it looks like something it exists, it doesn't exist. It's being forced into existence at every moment by the Dvar Hashem, and therefore Taka Ein Movade. And what's interesting is there are two psukim in the Torah which proclaim this idea of Ein Movade. One of them is I'll give you a hint. Very prominent in this past Yom Tov, which we just came from. Very good. Ata hareisa ladas ki Hashem hu Elokim.
Ein od mevade.
Ein ed movade. Ein ed movade. That's one pasuk. Another pasuk, we say in Aleinu, v'yadata hayoyim v'ashaveis alavecha, ki Hashem Elokim b'shema mimal v'ash mitachas, ein oid. They're very similar psukim, right? Well, proclaiming that Hashem's oneness. But if you look in page 152, the Alter Rebbe begins Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah with which pasuk? Not the pasuk of Ata Hareisa, but he begins with the pasuk of V'yadata Hayoyim v'ashaveis alavecha. What is the difference between Ata Hareisa and V'yadata Hayoyim? Ata Hareisa describes what happened by Matan Torah. By Matan Torah, it was revealed to us. Ata Hareisa, you showed yourself, Vadas, so that we should know that Ein Movadeh. The Hashem who will came Ein Movadeh. That was a revelation from above. It's not about a revelation. Hashem says, I want you to know. I want you to take the heart. I want you to contemplate this. Until you arrive at the recognition on your own that the Eibishter is the one, there's nothing other than Hashem. And Alter Rebbe chooses to start with that pasuk. Because when something is revealed to us and it requires for us, again, to suppress or repress a certain part of us or ignore a certain part of us, that's a problem. Perek Aleph of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah is Ata Hareisa Ladas. It was revealed to us. By who? By the Baal Shem Tov. By who? By the Arizal. That's Ata Hareisa. It was revealed to us that Ein Movadeh. But Perek Beis is where we really want to go to. And that's the V'yadata Hayoyim v'ashaveis alavecha, making it logical and making it intelligible. And that's what we have over here, Dafka in Perek Beis. Now we can ask the question the other way around. No, what's the question now? So why do we need Perek Aleph? Why don't we just go straight to Perek Beis? Why do you need to tell us that the Arizal says this and that the Baal Shem Tov says this? Go straight to Perek Beis, where we logically prove this idea that Hashem is the one. And this is the basic idea of Nasa v'Nishma. Our own seichel alone also is not enough. Because our own seichel is limited and our own seichel can mislead us. And obviously there's nothing as true and as complete and as holy and as unlimited and infinite as the word of Hashem, which is revealed to us. Revealed to us through the Torah and through the Nevi'im and through the Mekubalim. And that has to be the basis and the foundation of everything. First thing is, in the Lashon of the Gemara, Kabbalah hi nekabel, right? If this is what's the Kabbalah, we're mekabel it. But we can't stop over there. On the other hand, we can't go. When you go with your own seichel alone, come in farfirin. You can go off the derech very easily. You can go off the proper path. You start with, what does it say in Torah? What does it say in the Sfarim of the Zayir and the Kisvei Rizal, etc.? But once we know what is, why? Because Ata Hareisa Ladas, once it was revealed to us, then it's our job, V'yadata Hayoyim v'ashaveis alavecha, not to suffice with, if the Arizal said it, it must be true. But rather, we need to go and explore it in our mind and make sure that it resonates and makes sense with us to the point that our whole being is suffused with Achdus Hashem and with the idea of Ein Movadeh, and our mind also accepts it and embraces it, our mind embraces it, our heart embraces it, and that leads obviously to Machshava Dibur Maisa. Next week, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll start Perek Gimel.